It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Kirk Davis is a solution architect on the Application Modernization team at AWS. He's based in Portland, Oregon, where he focuses on helping customers to modernize legacy .NET framework monoliths. And I can especially emphasize from Kirk's bio that he started to work with .NET from version 1. Actually, it's a time of this book, of this museum vintage book. Welcome, Kirk.
Hey, thank you very much, Maxim. So yeah, I was a V dash at Microsoft back when .NET Framework 1 was coming out. So many years ago. I think about 20 years ago now. So today, I think Maxim already introduced me. I live in Portland, Oregon, so this is a long distance call for sure. And today I want to talk about modernizing .NET applications. Everyone see a presentation? Looks like it is showing up. Perfect. So I do have a bunch of slides. I'm also going to try to do 2 demos. They're both going to be pretty quick, so it won't be all slides. So if you want to start praying to the demo gods, maybe telling me. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit about why many .NET developers and .NET end up deploying to AWS. It may not often be the first cloud provider of mind if you're a .NET person. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about that and then talk about some of the modernization tools and services that we have for that. So first, if you're like me, you probably don't spend a lot of time on the corporate sponsors page of anything, including the .NET Foundation. So you might know that AWS is a sponsor of the .NET Foundation. We've also contributed developer time and code to .NET Core. Recently, we made pretty significant contributions to Core WCF, which is a port of Windows Application Foundation from .NET Framework to .NET Core. So if you're running, if you're trying to modernize a WCF hosted application, you might be using some of our work. I'm also going to quickly go over some of the ways that provide support .NET. First, we have lots of services. I think when I started here about 5 years ago, we had like 50 services maybe. We probably have somewhere around 200, but I've just lost. For all those services, there's an SDK. It's for .NET Framework, .NET Core, or .NET 5 now since the rename is happening. And they let you interact easily with our services right from C# or .NET code. So they're great for interacting with S3 or DynamoDB or any of the other services we have. Another popular service for .NET that's been around for, I don't remember when the last thought came out, probably around 10 years ago. It's very popular for managing and deploying and hosting .NET apps, especially ASP.NET apps. It manages the deployments for you, including blue-green deployments. It'll automatically update the environment. So you don't ever have to, apply patches and Windows updates. It sets up auto scaling and a load balancer for you if you want that. And Elastic Beanstalk supports .NET Framework on Windows and .NET Core on either Windows or Linux. We also have services for building CI/CD pipelines. So if you're taking DevOps or just don't want to manually update things, which you really shouldn't be doing anymore, we have AWS Code Pipeline is the sort of the pipeline organ tool, and then Code Build is the build component of that. Code Build supports building .NET on both Windows and Linux, .NET Framework on Windows or .NET Core on either one. We have pre-configured build environments for both. Those are just pre-built container images that you can use that we supply. You can also create your own. You can have one of the official .NET Framework or .NET Core on Linux images directly from Microsoft's container registry, which you might have used if you're using containers like MCR. I can't remember the rest of that URI. We have 2 different container orchestration services, ECS, which is our original container Elastic Container Service for orchestrating all your containers and scaling them and integrated with other services. EKS is a managed Kubernetes service, so it's very much in the same is like AWS. If you've used Azure Kubernetes Service, this is pretty much in the same vein there. We support .NET Core in our serverless platform, Lambda. We were actually the first major cloud provider to support .NET Core by a few weeks, at least, in our function as a service platform. And this platform is called Lambda. If you'd like, you might think that serverless platform are the same. GCP, Google Cloud has one, Azure has Azure Functions, AWS has Lambda. There are differences in the performance characteristics between these. If you'd like a great and recent and unbiased look at the ways that, say, Azure Functions and AWS Lambda perform under load, I would really encourage you to read a blog written by James Randall. He's an Azure MVP, and he published a blog about 2 weeks ago on the Azure Functions that looks at how these two different serverless platforms compare for running .NET under load. Another thing that we offer is we have a development kit, which, we have a infrastructure as code service called CloudFormation. This is JSON or YAML, much like if you've used Terraform or the Azure or Google Cloud equivalents. Most of them use templates, right? So we had lots of developers who were .NET developers, and they wanted their infrastructure as code to use actual code, C# code. So with the CDK, you can create your deployment stacks and infrastructure with C# and have unit tests or whatever else you want for that, and it will deploy that infrastructure for you. Next thing I wanted to talk about as far as services was SAM, which is our serverless application model. This makes it really easy to create and deploy serverless applications that run in Lambda and use some of the other serverless services that we have, like DynamoDB and API Gateway, which is a proxy layer that sits in front. And we also have a URL I wanted to put up. If you go to aws.amazon.com/net, direct you to our .NET developer portal. There's links to all this stuff there. There's also documentation for how to use these services with .NET. We have some toolkits that we have created, and they're free. We have the AWS toolkit for Visual Studio, which is a plugins extension. We also have toolkits for VS Code and for JetBrains Writer. These let you do things like deploy your app directly to the cloud from any of these IDEs. You don't want to do that in prod, obviously, but if you're a developer testing and developing, it's great. It makes it really easy to interact with AWS from any of these. We have lots of customers that actually are in Azure DevOps for their CI/CD pipelines, and they've got their code in the Azure DevOps code repository, but they end up, for whatever reason, deploying into AWS. Maybe they're migrating to AWS, whatever it is. We have a free plugin. It's available in the Azure Marketplace. It's the AWS Toolkit for Azure DevOps. We also for the .NET CLI. We have the Amazon tools, which lets you build or deploy and manage your Lambda serverless projects, whether those are ASP.NET or just straight .NET, projects in Lambda. You can also, we have an ECS tool that lets you deploy your containerized apps. It'll let you deploy and manage with one line in the ECS tool. I can take a containerized app I have, and it will do all of the Docker build and deploy up push the container image up and update the service and everything with one line, which is super, one line command, which is super helpful. Same thing for Elastic Beanstalk. There's a CLI tool for that. We recently launched the AWS Deploy CLI tool, which I'm going to really quickly demo here in a minute. And then last, we have a bunch of project templates that you can install with the normal, .new-i Amazon.lambda templates. It'll give you a bunch of templates that are pre-configured for .NET Core or .NET 5 to run serverless and as a service in AWS Lambda really easily. So really quick, I'm going to try to fit in a quick demo here. It's not going to be a very big one or an extensive one. I am going to, I don't know, do we want to go full screen here so people can see my, hopefully that's legible. If anyone is able to make this go full screen, that's great. If not, I will, hopefully you can see it. I'm just going to do a normal .NET new MVC app, and I will call it Cloud Builder. And let's give that a minute. I know I'm looking at other monitors, so bear with me. Okay, so .NET Core has this Cloud Builder app. We'll give it a second. And so I'm just going to CD into Cloud Builder. And I'll launch VS Code here just to show you this MVC app. And up it comes. Dun, 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 maybe. I can being painfully today, or it is. I'm going to make some kind of trivial change to the index file. I think it's Zoom that's causing this to be actually because I'm sharing the screen. I'll just add some text here. Welcome to Club Builder Conference and save that. Okay. And then I could run this obviously locally with .NET Run. Instead, I'm going to use the new CLI deploy tool, which is just yes, deploy. That's it. Once you've installed the tool, to install the tool, it's .NET tool install -G for global, and then AWS deploy CLI. So this tool's early. It's like 0.4, I think, is the version. I can check that in a minute. So this is not a finished product in that it's in public preview. So we encourage you to use it and play with it and give us feedback, and we'll put that in. It's asking me if I want to, over here, if you look, it's saying, give my stack, the stack that it's going to deploy, give it a name. I am going to leave the default, which is Cloud Builder. It's giving me some options. It's saying that it can deploy it to Elastic Beanstalk on Linux. I could deploy it to Amazon ECS using Fargate. That's what I'm going to do. Fargate is this serverless container feature that we have. I'm about that a little bit more in a minute. So I'm going to pick 2 and hit enter. And it's going to create the Docker file and add it to my project for me. It's specified. I have a bunch of options here. I'm just going to go with the default for everything and hit enter. I may not wait for all this to happen, but it's actually now created the Docker file. It's calling Docker build. It's going to build it. It's going to push the container image up to AWS container registry, which is ECR. And then it's going to create a service in ECS for running my web app. And it's going to launch the service with 3 copies of that container running across 3 different data centers, or what we call avail zones. And then it's going to put a load balancer and fire all that up for me. It's probably going to take it about 5 minutes or so. So I'm going to continue with the presentation, and then we can come back and check on the status of this. But it really is, I think I had to type, a 3-word command and then hit enter a few times. And then this is going to be deployed out there in a few minutes. So I'm going to see if I can get back into everyone's favorite point. Dun, dun. And sweet. Come on. I'll zoom my CPU here. All right. So while that demo is ongoing, let me massage my screen a little bit here. I did start talking about modernization a little bit. Lots of people are moving their applications to the cloud. It's why AWS and Azure GCP and other clouds are growing so quick. But a lot of that movement that we see, it's just lift and shift. They've taken their apps that are running on servers and centers, and they've moved them into servers, in Amazon's or Microsoft's or Google's. That's not really modernizing the app. There's advantage in shift, but it's not necessarily your desired end state. It's not taking advantage of those cloud architectures. And so, what is modernization, and would you do it, or why should you want to do it? If you ask 5 different, you're probably going to get 6 different answers. But in the context of moving to the cloud, think of modernization process to sort of realize the benefits of running your app in the cloud and the transformation of your app. So that's what I talk a little bit. I'm going to talk about a sort of typical modern path that we see lots of customers go through. There are many different perfectly valid ways to modernize your app. I'm going to talk about a fairly typical one, which is just, you've got an ASP.NET, maybe ASP.or something. It's in IIS. It's on Windows Server. It's a monolith. A single server here on an instance, which is our virtual machine service. It's EC2, but maybe you have it on 3 behind to make it different. On the back end, I'm showing a SQL Server database. Maybe you've also got a favor. If you're like most, if your app is like most of them, that database is probably holding everything. So, we're going to talk about what happens when you modernize, or how you might go about modernizing it. I've seen most customers that we have fall into one of two approaches. Either they do what's called the Bing method, where they kind of drop everything, just modernize the entire app all at once. Might take a lot of time. The other alternative is to sort of iteratively carve off pieces of functionality and modernize at time, and then slowly your monolith starts dwindling down. It's kind of a variation on Martin Fowler's STIG pattern, where instead of just build off, you're actually actively carving off pieces of the old one. And that's the path I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to it's already in AWS. It's been lifted and shifted. So typically the first things we're going to do before pulling functionality out of their monolith, and again, I'm talking about a web app, so we're assuming there's a lot of HTTP traffic coming in, is they're going to put a facade between their users and the app. And if you've already got multiple web servers and a load balancer pretty much is your facade. Right? We have two different services that can act as the facade. We have Application Load Balancer or API Gateway. They have some other services too, but these are really the two that we would most likely using. They both let you create routes to different backend services. Both of these allow you to offload and authorization out of your app and into the really lets you move your if I go back to the prior slide, you'd see that this server is running in a public subnet because it's publicly exposed to the internet for traffic. But once I put that facade in front, I can move my infrastructure into a private subnet where it can't get into from the internet, which is great from a security point of view as well. Another step that we see a lot of customers do is just offload static content off the web server. Rather than having your web server work to serve up, static content like images or videos or HTML and whatnot, you can offload that to an object store and then serve it using a CDN. Or in our case, we have two services here. Amazon S3 is our object store that launched in 2006. As of about a month ago, I think, we have more than 100 trillion objects in Amazon S3. So it's sort of a very scalable service. It's as scalable as your company could need it, your organization would need it. CloudFront at the end, which you might put in front, CloudFront offers things like let you cache your content at the edge and can apply geographic IP restrictions and a lot of other features. You don't have to use that. Amazon S3 can actually serve static directly. Like you could host a static website directly in S3 if you want. But often if you're operating at scale, you put a CDN in front. And then you can start carving off pieces of your monolith. Typically, if you're running an MVC or web API app, maybe you're carving off a controller or a small group of controllers at a time, porting the code to .NET Core, and then this lets you deploy them in smaller units. Whether or not you call that a microservice or not isn't really that important, but it lets you deploy them into lightweight Linux containers or onto a function as a service platform like Lambda. AWS has a cool feature I mentioned earlier called Fargate. That's the one I picked when I was demoing that .NET CLI deployment tool. Fargate is for containers, really what Lambda is for functions, right? Fargate lets you deploy your containers without worrying about the infrastructure that it runs on. Scott Hunter made a great point that running a full Kubernetes cluster for a lot of apps, it can be overkill. There's a lot of work to set it up. You need to learn a lot of new skills. We have ECS, which is a easier path, container orchestration. But even there, with ECS, no way of using it, you still had hosts under the hood that had up and down. With Fargate, you don't have any infrastructure to worry about at all. You just say, here's my container, please go run 3 copies or auto scale it or whatever. So let's see, where was I? There's also the database on the back end, which I'm going to talk more about that later. We do have quite a few customers that have been migrating from proprietary databases like Oracle or SQL Server to license-free databases. We have a whole variety of license-free database engines. We also have managed SQL Server and managed or instance, if you have things that you can't move off of those proprietary databases, at least you don't have to manage the database engine. So once you've carved all these services that you've carved out of that Windows monolith and they're running in Linux containers or as serverless, then you might be left with this piece harder to get off of Windows, or maybe you don't really have a compelling interest in that last chunk and converting it from framework to core. You could deploy that as a Windows server container with both ECS and EKS. Those are the 2 services I mentioned for running containers in AWS. They both support Windows server containers. They both group managed security accounts or group managed service accounts for Active Directory authentication to databases and things like that. So this could sort of an end state here. The Windows Server container could be running in ECS or EKS. Back over here, there were 2 things on the left, the .NET Framework 2.4 and then the database conversion. Those are the 2 hard things to do, right? Setting up the infrastructure might not be that hard, but converting your code can be hard. So I want out 2 different tools we have that get you started with that. The first one is the porting assistant for .NET. We launched this last year. It's a desktop tool that helps you convert from .NET Framework to .NET Core. It does an assessment to tell you how compatible it's. It will automatically do replacement and upgrade of NuGet packages. It'll convert your web config to app settings.json. It'll make some common code changes. It's really aimed at ASP.NET, MVC, and Web API Pro. Because web forms, there's no equivalent project type. That's a much more substantial undertaking, and this tool does not attempt to do that. So I'm going to do a quick demo of this. Let's see. Our other one did finish, by the way, so I could show you that in a minute, but in the interest of time, I'm going to jump into the porting assistant. This is the porting assistant. It's a tool. I'm going to go to assessed solutions. I haven't assessed anything yet, so I'm going to add a new solution and choose a solution file. Oh, before we do that, I am going to show you the solution I'm going to port. I purposely picked a rather simple one because I wanted it to go quick. You can do more complicated ones with lots of different projects. This one's just a work MVC app with one simple dependency project that's got a classes in it. I think if I look at this one, I think it's .NET Framework 4.6 maybe. I'm trying to remember. 4.7.2, so that's great. And if I look in the web config, you can see there's some app settings in here, connection string in here. So I'm going to exit out of this. Oh, actually, I was going to run this first really quick, just to show you what it looks like. It's just basically the generic template. I made a couple little edits. We'll see how long it takes my computer to launch. Oops, and it's in the wrong window, of course. So this is coming up. So the tool is going to assess this, and then I'm going to try to automatically port it to ASP.NET Core, do a couple little cleanup bits. Okay, this is taking way too long. Let's see. Well, I was really hoping this would go quicker. It was last time. I'm not sure if I have a conflict with a port to, let's see. Oh, there it goes. Wow, that was super slow. Okay, so Cloud Builders Conference, .NET Stack, .NET Track. You probably recognize this if you've ever done any sort of ASP.NET MVC work and .NET Framework. There's a couple little things in here like pick a random and it'll just keep that. Okay, so that's what it looks like in .NET Framework. I'm going to close out of the solution so I don't lock the file or anything so that the porting assistant can get to it. And then I'll minimize this. Okay, so I will choose a file. I've got, there's nothing in here, ported to .NET Core. That's the folder I've created to take it. So here's the solution file, and I will open this up and then say assess. The assessment takes about 1.5 minutes. So that's happening. We'll give that a minute. I am going to flip back over to the first demo I did and look at what it output. It outputted the URL, this URL, for that one that I deployed from the command line tool. So while my next demo is running, I am going to pop that URL in here and see what comes up. Yay, okay. So this is the one that I had created new using the .NET, CLI, created a new MVC app and deployed it using that the deployment CLI tool. So it did eventually work. Okay, so this is finished assessing. I'm gonna click on the app, the .NET. This is .NET Framework 4.7.2. I can export an assessment report. It's going to export CSVs. I can go back and look at the dependency graph. This is a really simple one. Like I said, there's only 2 projects. There's the MVC app and then a dependency project. In a typical, if you're working in a business and you've got, a typical ASP.NET framework, you probably have 8 or 10, maybe more dependencies, lots and lots of things. So this will do enough for you. I can look at the NuGet packages and it'll show me what's able and what's not. It'll show me compatible and incompatible APIs that it's calling. So here is it's calling some that are incompatible. I can even drill down into the source files and find, say, let's go to color utils. This one was fine. If I go into one that's incompatible down here, incompatible API calls in global ASCX, it shows me that there's an incompatible method that's trying to be called that won't work in .NET Core, and it will make following changes to the code automatically. And as time goes on, this is going to get smarter and smarter as we get more feedback. So I'm just going to go ahead and say I want to port the entire solution to .NET Core. You could either do it in place. That's not really what I recommend. I said going to a new location. I'm going to choose the folder. I'm going to choose this empty folder, ported to core, and save. It's going to start writing some stuff there, and then hopefully me some options here in a second. Okay, so here's a summary of what it's going to do. It's the target projects are in .NET 4.5 and 4.7.2. It's going to port them to this folder that I just picked, port them to .NET 5. It's giving me the option to upgrade to different versions of NuGet packages. It'll tell me if there's anything incompatible or deprecated. I'm just going to leave all that the way it is right now and click port. So it's a great tool. It's a great tool to get you started. Creates the new CS proj file and the app settings.json, replaces NuGet packages, does some minor code changes. Completely magical. You're not a full big business app that you've got that's got 18 projects, port it to .NET Core, and then build it and run it, right? So there's always going to be cleanup. Microsoft actually recently released a tool as well. Theirs is a command line tool. I haven't had a chance to play with it, but I really want to take a look at theirs also, just to give a shout out. So it's successfully ported 2 projects, and then it's writing. It's going to take a minute or 2 to finish that. It creates a log for you. I'm going to go into the one that it's created, which is in here. This is the ported to core. I don't know if you can see timestamp on the screen. It might not be legible on the Zoom call, but this all just got created just now. And then we're going to open that up. Let me see, does it say it's done? Okay, so this thing's completely done. I'll minimize the tool, and I'm going to go back to Visual Studio and open up the new one. And we're going to see what we got. Ported to core and open. And in a few seconds, Visual Studio will open it up. And then I'm going to check. Now, this simple dependency project, this is just a class library. I am going to check to verify that it is, oops, IntelliSense is finishing. Let me give Visual Studio a second thing here. Okay, let me try that again. If I go to the properties for this library project, it's now .NET 5. Same thing with the framework project. Both of these are now in .NET 5. So this dependency library project, it only has classes in it. So I can just right click and build that like already, and it's already going to build in .NET 5 because there really wasn't a lot to do there. If I go and try, whoops, build started. Wow, this all goes much faster when Zoom is not hogging my. I think it's time for me to get a new laptop probably. Okay, build succeeded. If I try to right click and build this one, I'm going to get a couple of build errors, and I'm going to really quickly show you what failed, and then we're going to release those. If I double click this, it takes me and it says configuration manager.configuration.get section. I wanted to show you in the app settings.json that it created. Come on. Wow. Okay, there it goes. App settings, those things I showed you, the settings and web config earlier, the connection strings and the app settings, those all got copied over into the appropriate place in app settings.json. The code that reads that in .NET Core is a little bit different though. So I'm not sure what this line, oh, there we go. Let me collapse this. So I'm gonna change this code a little bit just to get rid of the get section here. And then if I hover over this, Visual Studio will prompt me to, oops, wow, there we go. Using ASP.NET Framework MVC. Okay, and I can delete this unneeded using statement. I think the same thing is in one more file I've got to fix, is in utils, DB connector, where connection string, I've got the same thing. It's got the .NET Framework version of this code, which I'll just delete. And then I'll let Visual Studio prompt me to put in the right using statement. Okay, and hit save. I think both of those are now fixed. Last thing is I want to, there's some stuff in the view itself that's going to probably not compile, and I'll show you what that is. Okay, so here we have these script tags. ASP.NET Core doesn't use these. I'm just going to comment those out. And those are adding the CSS and the bundles. I already know that I can replace those in ASP.NET Core. I'm just going to put in style sheets to the Bootstrap CSS. I'm not going to replace the scripts themselves. I'm going to replace it. I'm going to just comment this out down below. I basically want to just get this to build so I can show it to you. And if I come back over to here and say build, hopefully this will build. If I miss something, yay, build succeeded. So if you remember when Scott Hunter was showing, can now deploy directly using the, and I don't have that option in here. I don't have the update installed yet. I think you can use the Windows subsystem for Linux here. I won't do that. Use Kestrel. So this is the same web server engine that you would use if you were on Linux. Go ahead and run is the ASP Core version of the app that we just converted. Let's give that a minute. And eventually goes. So here's the Kestrel coming up, and hopefully it launches the browser in the right window, or else I will drag it across. And let's see, is it going to launch the browser for me? It usually does. If not, I will just copy this and, oh, it did. Oh, it launched it in the other window though. Oh, I didn't get my I didn't get the CSS, something not quite right there. How did I mess that up? I actually had this working the last time I did this. These two links did work. I'm not sure what I did wrong this time. In any case, the app itself built and ran. I think it's possible that I would have had to drag the CSS, these two, the content and the scripts, or at least the content, into the www root. Maybe I'll try that really quick to see if I don't use up too much time. There's a www root folder I will include. Whoops. Maybe. Include in project. And then I'm going to drag the content down to, up to www root. Okay. And let's try that one more time. If it doesn't work, the app itself is running. I just have something wrong with the style sheets, which I don't think is a huge thing. And then I'll flip back and we'll finish some more slides. Maybe. So the cool thing though is that, like, with very few changes, I now have that app went from .NET Framework, ASP.NET 4. Whatever it was. Oh yeah, that did it. Okay. So I just had to move the content, the actual CSS files, over into a folder. So this is now the ASP.NET core version of this app. Use, pick a random number. That works. I think some of these other links are going to try to hit a database that I didn't stand up, so I'm not going to demo those. But the about and home. So yeah, that was it. So this is the ported application running. Now deploy this to a Fargate container. I could deploy it to other cloud providers in Linux containers. I could actually deploy this as an app directly to Lambda. AWS Lambda can run ASP.NET apps as well. Okay, so I'm going to shut this back down and flip back to some more modernization stuff. 1 second. And let's swap those again. All right, so that was the end of that demo. Let me get my screen set up. So I'm gonna just at a high level say, if you have Windows containers, if you want to containerize your Windows app and run it on Windows containers, we have a tool, a free tool that lets you do that. It's called the App to Container tool. It can, even with a deployed application that's running an IIS on Windows, you can run this tool and it will identify the ASP.NET apps that are registered with IIS. It'll find where they're deployed. It'll create a Docker file. It'll generate the Docker image, push that up to the AWS Container Repository, ECR. It will deploy the app for you out into ECS. It'll even create optionally create a CI/CD pipeline for you. Even if you don't have the source code to your app anymore, it can do it from the deployed app that's running on Windows and IIS. And I don't do a demo of this just because it's a PowerShell-based tool, and so it doesn't make a very interesting demo, and it takes quite a while. This tool is mainly used by customers who are moving lots of Windows apps into AWS. Maybe they've got 80 or 100 or 200 different applications, and they just want to get them up to the cloud. And containerizing them and deploying them to ECS is a really straightforward and consistent way to do that. And it lets them move those applications around really easily because they're containerized. Then next, I wanted to talk about database modernization. I had started talking about, let me see 1 second. I think I've got my screens messed up a little bit here. 1 second. I'm trying to find the, well, that's okay. I'll just continue then. Database modernization. Let me see is this gonna go? Oh, there it goes. Okay, sorry. PowerPoint up on me. That's the nightmare. For many decades, the only real database choice that you as a developer probably had was a relational database. And it didn't really matter what shape your data was in or the function of the data in your app. It was always modeled as relational. And so you had instead of the use case that you had driving the choice of database, it was the other way around. It was a one size fits all. So one of the benefits of running in the cloud is you have a lot of choices for database engines. At AWS, we have many different flavors of relational database engines that are fully managed, including SQL Server. But we also have high performance columnar database for like data warehousing called Redshift. We have a graph database called Neptune. Amazon DynamoDB is one of our most widely known NoSQL databases that's very high performance for non-relational data. We have databases that are optimized for time series data, for cryptographically verified ledgers. I would encourage you to go explore and find the one that fits your use case. So if you are going to do a project where you're moving your data, migrating it out of, say, SQL Server or Oracle into some other database engine or completely different data store, we have a tool called the Schema Conversion Tool that helps you with that. It's a desktop tool. I could demo that, but that's a half-hour demo by itself. And the database migration service moves the data itself. So the Schema Conversion Tool can automatically, oops, it's my, come on. PowerPoint, there we go. The schema conversion tool can automatically convert the schema, tables, data types, stored procedures, triggers, views from one engine to another. So often I've helped customers move from, say, SQL Server to Amazon Aurora for Postgres, which is a very scalable, high-performance database that uses the Postgres engine. And this tool will automatically do a lot of that for you. I mean, if there's something in a stored procedure that it can't that it's having trouble converting, it'll like annotate that, and then you can go and manually do that piece. So this is, it generates a nice report. It'll do an assessment to tell you like how easy it is to do this conversion to Postgres versus to MySQL, or from Oracle to, MySQL, Oracle to Postgres, Oracle to MariaDB, whatever. These are very useful in choosing the target database engine that you're going to go to. How are we on time? I need to really probably wrap this up. Now, one challenge in doing that, if you're going from, I've got my application talking to SQL Server, my code, my queries are written in T-SQL, I'm talking to a TDS endpoint, tabular data stream. So if you're doing that and you wanted to move to like Aurora Postgres or a different engine, you have to, if you're using Entity Framework, EF Core, that might not be too horrible. You could swap out the provider. Still got that endpoint, which is now a different driver. A lot of stuff you'd have to change, right? You have to rewrite your T-SQL, rewrite your app code, switch drivers just to switch to this other database. So in preview, to help solve the problem at reInvent, we announced a feature of Aurora Postgres, which is our web's Postgres compatible database, called Babelfish. So if any of you ever read Douglas Adams as a kid, which I did, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if you remember, he had the little Babelfish in his ear and he could understand other languages. Babelfish is an error that exposes a TDS, tabular data stream point, for your Aurora Postgres, and it also translates T-SQL into PL SQL on the fly. So it's sort of a translation layer. Like I think I just talked through this a minute ago. Your application will think talking to SQL Server, but use S over 1433 by default. Your queries are in straight TSQL, but this will translate that on the fly into PLSQL and the language that Aurora Postgres stands. This is a built-in capability of Amazon Aurora. It really helps you ease that migration path. Oops. Because instead of do this big X in the middle, if you're carving things off and migrating those to, say, .NET Core, you could be switching those to natively to the Postgres endpoint, use PLSQL, but you still got that monolith there that's running on Windows, and you don't want to have to go back and like revamp all that and try to rewrite its code to talk to the new database. It could continue talking using T-SQL and tabular data stream, but it will actually be talking to the new Postgres database behind the covers. There's a lot of reasons that you move to Aurora. It can scale up, can probably scale SQL Server to. It's quite performant. It's less expensive. There's no license for this. Take that exact same code and run it with Postgres in your own data center or in Azure or Google Cloud or wherever. So this is in private. You can sign up on our website. Go do a Google for AWS Babelfish Postgres, and you'll find the sign up page, and then you can start testing it out. It's really pretty cool. Finally, just some roadmap tidbits. AWS Lambda supports LTS releases. .NET. Scott Hunter talked a little bit about .NET 6 is the next version of LTS. So if I deploy .NET Core code to Lambda and use the out-of-the-box managed runtime, we support .NET Core 1. You can still run .NET 5 in Lambda. It's really easy. We have the Visual Studio Toolkit will let you do that. It'll just create a custom runtime for you and put that up. When .NET 6, that is LTS, and we will support that in Lambda also out of the box. You can already do that now with the previews. You can run those in Lambda using that custom runtime, or in a container if you want. You can in Lambda as well now. We are other modernization tools. I can't give you, I'm not at liberty to give a lot of details, but we have seen customers struggling with how to extract services out of this big .NET framework monolith, and just trying to identify all the dependencies and extract that out. So we're aware that that can be hard to do. It can also be hard to keep everything running while you're putting out services into microservices, and you want to keep those isolated. You might want to ensure that traffic is flowing and monitoring your legacy and the new microservices or whatever you're pulling out, the pieces, and hosting those in maybe containers or Lambda. You're basically rebuilding the airplane while you're flying it, right? So we have things that we're working on that will make that process easier as well. And if you are a customer that has a solutions architect, an AWS solutions architect, you can always reach out to them and say, hey, I want to find out what sorts of things you might have for me in preview that I could play with, and maybe they can tell you about that. I wanted to jump to Q&A because I think I may be almost out of time, because I know we lost some time there when my connection dropped. So Maxim, I'm going to throw this back to you for a second and say questions. And next time I'll try to pay closer attention to see if the connection dropped about that.
Yes, thanks, Kirk. Great session. And demo gods were kind to us, but not all connection gods, right? So, but yeah, I think we managed out everything. And actually, we have a few questions, and especially about Aurora. But unfortunately, we literally don't have time. We're a bit behind the schedule. So let's do the following. Let me ask our dear organizers to onboard you to the chat system of this conference. And we'll repost questions from Slido to there. And if you have a few minutes left, you can answer these questions by text. Sounds good?
Sure. Yeah, let's do that. Thank you very much, Maxim.
Thank you, Kirk. Talk to you later. Bye.
And I love it, by the way. I love your shirt.
Thanks.